So I know there are several of us out here that are driving our kiddos to college right now, dropping them off with all their things that we've probably like micromanaged the crap out of all the lists and making sure that they don't forget anything, right? And how does it feel as you are driving back home? Maybe you're driving back home with your spouse, their parent. Maybe you're driving back home alone. But it's difficult, is it not? It can feel almost, well, just intolerable. The grief really smacks you down. And for many of us midlife women, what to do next just feels like an insurmountable task. How am I going to navigate this? I'm coming back to a house that's completely quiet. Or maybe I'm coming back to a house with other kids, but I'm just grieving the loss of having this person that has been under my feet for 18 years. Well, today on the podcast, we're going to talk about this. And I'm going to bring an angle that maybe you haven't thought of, but complements some of what we've been talking about in the podcast the last couple of weeks. So if you're interested, keep listening. Welcome. You're listening to The Centered Midlife, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice-divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Centered Midlife. So today I want to talk about empty nesting. I want to talk about letting those kids go. And like how dare they, right? How dare they be the amazing humans that they are and just go out there and start to become independent beings without us, right? I mean, it's got to be one of the most thankless parts of the parenting job is that if you've done it well, you might not hear much from them. Like if you've truly prepared them and they're out there in the world doing their thing. Well, first of all, they want to go out there in the world and do their thing. And second of all, like they probably won't be calling you for much. And that's really tough, right? Like the grief is huge. I remember when I brought my son, honestly, I brought him to a couple different dorm situations, but it was like August when we would drop him off in August. It was always just this like, okay, let's unpack everything and let's make sure everything is in the right place. And what don't you have? Like he moved into an apartment. The first year he was like in a dorm, and so less things that they needed, right? But the second time it was more of an apartment, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no plates, there's no any of that stuff. So let's go to Target. We'll do a huge Target run and make sure you have everything that you need. But man, did that drive home just feel like the pit, like in the pit of my stomach. I just felt empty. First of all, as you all know, my son wasn't even living at home with me every day by that time. I'd already done some of that grieving, but it just feels so crazy that this human that you have been responsible for 18 years is now out and about on their own. And, some of us do some funky things during this time. Like some of us maybe over try and contact them and try to be on top of things with them and interject ourselves. And that can harm that relationship. These kids really do want some time away from us and to figure themselves out, but enough safe distance, right? Like that they know that they can rely on us if shit hits the fan, they can come back to us. but they really need for us to give them that safe space away from us. And we are probably real sad that they're gone. Now, some of the questions that come up is like, why? Why is this grief so big at this time? Well, one of the angles that I want to go at, on this theme of some of those more codependent cultural norms that women are brought up in with this caretaking role is a lot of times what we're really grieving at this point is the role. It isn't the kid, just the kid, because of course we love that child, and of course we are striving and want for them to have a good life, and so like we're feeling good about that and proud of where they are, but at the same time really sad that they're not this small little person that we adored that, right? Okay, so there is that piece of it, but a big piece of this is I have literally built my life around this major piece of being the mom. And as these kids age, I mean, even if you're coming back to the house and there's other kids there, they're still older kids, and teen kids don't need us in the same way that our middle school and elementary school kids do and preschool kids do, right? It's a very different world as they get older. And navigating that for ourselves a lot of times bumps up against, did we have some scripts from our childhood that we conflated our worthiness with how well we were caretaking? Like, I'm a good mom, and ergo I'm a good person. And now, without this huge piece of my life to basically prove to myself that I'm a good person, I'm grieving the loss of and trying to navigate, like, how do I even figure that out now? Like, if I'm not the mom that has all the things in my purse or an answer for everything or can come pick you up and drop you off and do if I'm not that person, who am I? And how do I have worth in this world? This can become particularly difficult for women if they've also put things like occupation over to the side for a while. Like maybe they're working, but it just is like to get an extra paycheck or a paycheck. But it isn't, one of the places where they feel like they're bringing value to their world. That can be particularly difficult. But even for those of us that have had to jostle both, this was a huge piece, and it was very rewarding, right? Especially when they're younger. When they're younger, can be very rewarding because you can kind of see the dividends right away. They love you. They want to be around you all the time. They're excited when you're home. They're excited when you've planned fun things with them. The teenagers, the natural developmental stages to individuate is what we call that in psychology. And so they kind of push against that. They push away from us and don't want as much time with us. So we might have been grieving some of that loss already. Again, if you're doing it well, that's what they're doing. They're pushing away from you, even when they're living in your house, much less when you've dropped them off at college. But I want to come back to this idea that if you've conflated self-worth or worthiness with your parenting, your grief can be pretty significant at this time. And what do you want to do with that, right? Like, I remember that pit in my stomach driving home and really having to wrestle with the fact, because he hadn't been living with me, that I still was uncertain how I was going to get that need met, right? And then still even more, there are some women that this is probably one of the first relationships where they felt deeply loved. And that's a really sad thing to reckon with. But you may have come from a very emotionally, like an emotional desert in your family of origin, not a lot of love to go around. And so how you showed up as a parent in a large part was for you as much as it was for the kid. You wanted to do it well this time for them, but there was a benefit to you with that, right? So when this person goes away and that method for feeling loved and cared for also goes away, what are you going to do with that? That's a huge loss. Now, a couple podcast episodes ago, I talked about how grief she is not going away. Like she will keep knocking on that door, coming back. She accumulates over time. So every loss that we have in our life, if we haven't really metabolized that grief, that will show up for us. And grief itself is not an emotion. It's a stage and phase system that kind of shows up in our life, and we keep growing around it, but all the different emotions associated with it and all the different processes associated with it keep coming back. So just as a reminder, grief is, depression, obviously it's sadness, but it's also anger. And sometimes it's denial, sometimes it's bargaining, like maybe I can get myself out of this loss. I'll just figure this out. I'll push back on that. And eventually what we want to do is get to a place of acceptance and even making meaning. Yes, I have this loss. Yes, my kids moved out. And yes, this ability for me to feel worthy in the world is changing significantly. But I can make meaning from that. I can, I've learned, I can grow, I can evolve from here. And I think one of the biggest antidotes that I've watched work in several women's lives, including my own, is to start to build a relationship with yourself. I know, right? Like, how dare I say a therapist-y thing like that? But I'm gonna say it because this is probably what's at the heart of things like when you've conflated my worthiness with how much I hustled as a parent and I did it well so I could feel good about myself, or that love, like in that way, had never been present in your life before parenting, and it was so fulfilling for you, but now it transformed dramatically. And my friends, it's not going to get different. It's going to get more like that. Again, if the reward, if you've done a good job as a parent, is that these kids go away. They don't come back, right? They go become great humans out in the world. Do they visit? Of course. Do they still talk to you? Of course. But does that feel drastically different than what it was? Absolutely. And it should. So how are you going to manage that if you don't build a relationship for yourself? And there's a third thing that starts to happen as well. So during this grief and loss, one of the other things that we're noticing is, did I use parenting as one of my, well, it would be like my compensatory behaviors? Did I use it to numb myself away from other things that I haven't worked on yet? Because again, those old things will come to roost. So do I have some patterns of behavior where I was avoiding dealing with the thing that I really needed to deal with? And this is why I think building a relationship with yourself is so important. You need to get to know her. You need to know this person that you are. Again, for those of you that are really in the doldrums around this time, I really suggest that this is one of the best times to reach out and get some counseling or coaching. Again, in Minnesota, I have a small private practice, and I am happy to have you reach out. You can find me on my website, learntoloveyourstory.com or nataliemarcounseling.com, and we can talk about that. But ultimately, you need to be figuring out who this person is. And I think that sometimes it's a defense mechanism that we get so involved in these roles in our life as a way to, to numb away from never having been paid attention to well in our families of origin. So we learned in an emotional desert not to want, not to need, not to take up space. That kind of behavior is rewarded culturally, right? Women are supposed to be as small, quiet, and make as the least amount of problems as possible. And Gen X in particular, so women in this midlife range, somewhere between 45 and 65 right now, they learn to do that real well. That was kind of one of the cornerstones, is that we just won't, I'm not going to make a fuss. I don't have needs. I will hide my needs. I will mask my needs. I will sublimate my needs by getting, I'll be the best mom in the world, and then I can feel good about myself so that I don't have to have needs in other ways. But now what's happening is all of that is going to bubble to the surface. When the kids are gone, there's no way to hide from, I was basically numbing myself from needing to know myself, needing to meet my own needs, recognizing I even had needs, all because I was putting that time and effort into this parenting role. And all of that is happening alongside just the natural grief, because this person is somebody that you love and will always love tremendously, probably more than most of the relationships you've had in your life. Your children, these are the people you truly want to go out into the world and have the best life. And yet you want to be part of that life at the same time. So you're managing all of these really huge emotional shifts all at one time. Oh, and by the way, you're probably in perimenopause or menopause, right? So your estrogen has gone down. All the same things are at play here. Like estrogen goes down and all our distress tolerance goes down and our capacity to manage that distress goes down. We become human instead of superhuman as we were in our childbearing years. And so now you're going to have to wrestle with some of these biggest transitions ever in your life, but you're doing it at a time that really you feel the least resourced to be doing it. And this is why I think that counseling and coaching at this stage is such an important thing. Everybody's so different. I can give us all some general information, educate us, normalize this experience that we're all having as we drop these kiddos off at college. What I can't do is know your certain circumstance unless you're sitting across the couch from me, right? So that's why I think that this is a time to do that. And I know that the antidote that I have watched work over and over and over is women who are really exploring getting to know themselves. But there is some real discomfort, is what I would call that, some real discomfort in learning that. You're going to have to spend time with you, and spending time with you automatically is going to bring up for you something's wrong. I'm being selfish. I'm neglecting my responsibilities. These are the kinds of triggers that are going to come up if you have been the good mom, as it were, to really hustle for your worthiness. And if that was your conflation, or if these were the first relationships you really ever felt loved in, well, now you've got a roadmap for feeling loved that only comes from when you're the caretaker of another person. And I will tell you right now, that's a recipe for disaster in adult relationships. You can find people that want to be caretaken. You might be in a relationship with one of those people as the father of your kids or the spouse and other parent of your children. You may find that person needs you quite a bit and you're getting very resentful about it with an adult. With kids, you had the role and it made sense to you, but with another adult, if you've conflated that, you're getting like that resistance. That was what our last episode was. If you've conflated, I do for you and I'm loved, but you don't have enough resource and energy and even motivation to want to give anymore. And those are the only kinds of relationships you feel like you're in. They're draining. They're draining and they build this resentment over time. So, if you're somebody that dropped them off and you had conflated being the super mom with your worthiness, that's a problem. That's something that you're going to have to learn yourself to know how to value yourself, because you have worth before you were ever the best parent, right? And if you're somebody who's conflated, like not conflated, but rather like this was really one of the first relationships you ever feel truly loved in, was to be a mom and have that child just adore you, great. But not every relationship should feel like that, where somebody is dependent on you, right? And your relationship with that child will start to change because they don't need you as much. And I don't want you to conflate that with feeling not loved by them. If they're not calling you, you did your job, my friend. You are awesome. And that doesn't mean that you're not loved by them, but they might not say it very often, and you might not have those opportunities the way that you used to, because they're adults living out in the world now, right? And if this is bumping up against you've numbed yourself out over time, this was like a defense mechanism against not knowing who you are, trying to be worthy just by being small, not taking up space, not being a problem. Well, that also has had its shelf life in your life, and you've gotten to the point where you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to not be seen for the rest of my life. I don't want to not be understood or valued for the rest of my life. Now, a lot of women might find that some of their other relationships, like relationships with other women or just friendships, like that's a place where they can capitalize on getting fulfilled again, that's what they need at this stage. But man, if you don't know that about yourself, and if you've built your entire life around being a caretaker in a family unit, you may not have nourished those relationships. So you might be at this stage kind of left with not having access to that kind of a thing. And you're going to need to build it from the ground up. And building relationships as a woman in midlife looks very different than as a young adult. Like what your kids are doing, that's what they're doing. They're finding their people, but they're doing it on a college campus or in an apartment building, and, you know, a place where all sorts of young adults are, and, you know, finding people at work and those kinds of things. You've lived in a house, maybe gone to a job, so you have that, you know, extra. But I bet that most of the relationships you have are surrounded by your children, right? It's other parents, it's the coaches, it's the teachers. You may have made relationships, but it's all wrapped around what this role was. And I'm not always sure, if you don't have a relationship with yourself, that you know if those are your people. How would you know if you don't know what you needs, right? So this is this juncture where it's interesting, right? Like empty nesting is an interruption to the pattern of where we got our needs met for a long, long time, for at least 18 years, right? Got one kiddo, at least 18 years, several kiddos, good couple decades, maybe even a few, right? Just depends. If this is how your needs were met for that long, and you interrupt that process by that person goes away, that kiddo goes away, all of a sudden you are left with having to recognize what that pattern was doing for you. And maybe what it was doing for you was all healthy, right? All healthy. The three things I've talked about are honestly pretty normal, because we do have to wrap ourselves around the lives of these little people, especially when they're very, very young. And then it just becomes our pattern. But empty nesting at its core, really what it is a big pattern interrupt. You're not going to be able to get your needs met in the same way anymore. So at some level, you're going to have to transition to the next phase. And obviously, that's what midlife is all about, right? All sorts of transitions from one phase of our life into the next. And now you're going to have to do it with a little less neurochemical resilience for the distress that this discomfort is going to bring. But yeah, it's a change. You're going to be a different person. You're transitioning into a different life. So without that estrogen and without it, you know, what she brings and the keys she unlocks neurochemically in your body, you're going to have to do that with a little less resilience than you've had before. Be forgiving, be kind to yourself, you know, give yourself time as you're working through this. And if you don't feel like there is any soft voices, safe spaces in your life, create them by finding new friendships, create them by going to counseling or coaching to get some extra assistance. Find even, you know, online communities, not quite the connection level that I'd want you to have, but it's certainly a nice first place. So man, you can find Facebook groups of other women that have left their kids out to the world and figure out, like, can we figure out together how to do this? Can we kind of commune with one another and at least meet on the grief, the natural part of this grief, as we watch this wonderful person we're so proud of go out into the world, but we really just are grieving the loss of having them be in our day-to-day lives. And that's the gift, you know, the reward to being a good parent is that they're going to eventually not be in our lives every day, right? I want you to just give yourself this knowledge and gift that you have to start to build that relationship with you from the ground up. You got to get to know you. You're going to have more time and space, maybe journaling, reflection, but you're also going to have to hold that space with, I'm going to be triggered by that. I'm going to tell myself I'm being selfish. I'm going to try to fill that space with some other to-do list item. And I got to stop doing that. I got to be quiet and still and know myself. It's important for me to do that right now. I need to be contemplative about what do I know about me, and what do I know that being a parent and in the day-to-day muck, what was it doing for me? What was the reward for me? Or what was it covering up that what I didn't want to look at? And what do I need to be looking at? And do I need a little assistance in, separating all of that out and figuring out what my best next steps are? If you spend that time with yourself and listen, the voice, the negative Nelly, the mean girl, whatever you want to call her, she's gonna call you out. She's gonna be like, you're doing this again. You're doing this, like, you're being by yourself. That's selfish. You're being by yourself. You're isolating. That's bad. You need to not listen. Not everything she says is true. In fact, she's a resounding gong for what you're doing is different. What you're doing is new. I don't like it because I don't know it. But she isn't really telling you that you're doing something wrong or bad or negative. What she's telling you is you're doing something different and uncertain, and it feels uncomfortable. And that's okay. Like, if she's there, you're probably doing it right. You're giving yourself that time to yourself to get to know you. You're giving yourself, that relationship with you so that you're knowing what you need and knowing what you want and asking for it and going out and getting that, and not standing for relationships or for behaviors in relationships that are not serving you, not staying in jobs or in roles that are not serving you. If you're listening to her, she's probably telling you, hey, you're on the right track. But the words she's using is to say, don't do this and go back to the old you. You don't want to go back to the old you. First of all, the old you isn't there anymore. And the more we try to create that when our kids have aged out of our house, the more sad we get, the more we stay in more of the sad, angry, bargaining parts of our grieving process, and the less we are integrating and making meaning and accepting, like, this is new. I got a new version of me. So you can use negative Nelly or mean girl, whatever you want to call her, as kind of an indicator that if she's talking in your ear that you're being selfish and you're doing weird stuff, maybe she's right. What she's really saying is you're doing something that's uncertain, different, new, and she doesn't know about it yet. But that's the whole point, is that we have to spend that time with ourselves to get to know us. It's an important stage at this life transition. And if you want to feel more centered in your life and less, all over the place in the chaos of adjusting, you're gonna want to get to know this person, right? And I just want to reiterate, it's also just a time for grief. There's a lot of loss as our kids age, and it's okay to just feel what you're feeling right now. So if that, pit of your stomach feeling is happening as you're driving home from the dorm or the apartment, it's okay. Give yourself a day to just cry. I remember in graduate school when I learned that hormones are released in tears, some of the stress hormones, you're literally expressing them or releasing them out of your body as you tear up. I was like, well, thank God, right? Because people always want to say, oh, I don't want to cry. I don't want to cry. I want you to cry. I want you to cry. Because that's actually literally how you're going to release some of those more difficult chemicals, neurochemicals, the ones that represent stress and, just are weighing us down. We don't need them anymore. The loss is there, so grieve it. So be sad and, be angry and be irritable and be all of the things, but don't live there. Don't stay there. Adjust and reorganize and get to know yourself and stay reflective and learn how to fulfill your needs in different ways than what you've been doing up until this point. Go out there and discover yourself. Read a book. Do things with people, try stuff and see what happens. You'll learn about yourself. You might learn you don't like some of those things too. That's fine. But you're learning who you are in the midst of all this. There's no longer a pattern of behavior that keeps you so rigidly looking outside of yourself and that caretaking role that you're allowed space to learn who you really are. And let me tell you, she's the one you're going to live with for the rest of your life. You've caretaked these wonderful humans and you just drop them off, and that's great. But the person you're going to pick up and caretake for the rest of your life, that's you. That's you, my friend. She's not going anywhere. She's going to be with you. You can ignore her and try to go back to your old role of caretaking and neglecting yourself. But self-abandonment is not a great way to manage grief and loss. And if that's the choice you're making right now, you'll find that the adjustment is hard. And that's where midlife crisis shows up, if you want to call it midlife crisis. It's really just a difficulty in adjusting to the new transition in your life. But if you want to feel centered and you want to feel great about where your life is and be able to feel great for where your kids' lives are too, then a centered midlife means that you need to show up for you right now. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these two crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast. And I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.